to Kate. So, Kate, over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Can everybody hear me okay, hopefully? Really lovely to be here. I've been so excited about doing this webinar today as a slightly different format. We've got this brilliant panel that we've pulled together to talk about crafting the workplace metaverse. I really wanted to just bring people together from the world of learning, from the world of XR, and sort of open up this discussion. So I've got some questions to ask everyone, and I hope that you'll all be able to stay with us for the next hour as we unpack them. But before I introduce the panel, what I'd really love to do, Andrew, and I hope you can help me with this, is I wanted to ask everyone on the call a little bit about the current knowledge and experience of the metaverse, because that will help us, I think, in perhaps shaping some of our answers. So you should be able to see, hopefully, 3 questions here. The first one, do you have your own kind of working definition of the metaverse? The second one, have you had, or do you consider that you've had a metaverse experience? And the third one, have you experienced a metaverse experience at work? So this will just be really helpful to us in understanding the kind of state of adoption currently, and people here's experience. I'm going to let you guys answer this before I intro everyone.
I love when we watch the polls and you just see these bars going up and down and so on. But there's some fairly significant comments here. Just looking at the percentages, they're quite significant. I'm looking at the middle one. Have you had a metaverse experience? A third of the people here have had an experience there.
A third of people. That's really interesting, isn't it? That's great. And not sure. I put not sure in because I thought maybe people have had a sort of a web-based online experience of sort of social, but not sure if that constitutes metaverse. Maybe some AR experiences. I have seen a question here also from Kevin. I've heard of VR and AR, but what is XR? XR just means extended realities. It's the catch-all term, Kevin, for any kind of emerging realities. So I hope that's helpful in our conversations today.
I can see some people are, there's interesting comments. So Tom has put in the normal, in the regular chat, I don't really know much about it. That's why I've come here today. I last saw a 3D social environment. We're on Second Life in university.
Excellent.
So I think, I remember Second Life. That was some time ago.
Well, that's interesting and definitely relevant for our discussions today. So why don't let's have a look. So broadly, most people have not had a metaverse experience at work. By and large, people on this call, more than 55% haven't had a metaverse experience at all, but 35% have. And it looks like we're still grappling with the idea of a definition of the metaverse for the people on this call, but 30% do have. So I'd love to hear if people have got kind of definitions that they're willing to share. Let's move into our introductions, and I'd really like everybody to meet our fantastic panel. So who are we? Here we are represented by some of our alter egos. Frank, I'd love to start with you. Do you mind just telling us briefly who you are, what you do, and could you just give me your working definition of the metaverse?
Sure, thank you, Kate. So I'm Frank, CEO and founder of RUVR, which is, I'm sure some of you have heard, we are leading the creation, distribution, and management of AR and VR training courses in enterprises. Definition of the metaverse, Kate. As I said, I think I needed to split that before Facebook rebrand and after rebrand, because before Facebook rebrand into Meta, the definition of metaverse was simple and clear, although the term itself was not so popular. Or nowadays, Kate, I would say that the metaverse acquires a number of meaning and definition depending on who you're talking to. So my personal definition of metaverse is that it's a multi-reality and a multi-dimensional experiences via multi-channels. So that would be my definition.
Multi-reality,
multi-dimensional.
Okay, and multi-channel.
That's right.
Briefly explain what you mean by multi-dimensional.
Multi-dimensional, it's because nowadays the metaverse can be consumed not only in an immersive way, so in a 3D environment, but also you can actually be inside a 3D environment without be on it. So via maybe your tablet or your smartphone or even your laptop. So though the experience is in 3D, by reality it's not a fully immersive 3D. You still need to use your keyboard or your mouse to move your avatar around. So it's a multi-dimensional.
Right. Thank you, Sophie. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm Sophie Costin. I'm the Director of Learning at MakeReal. So we are an immersive learning company, and we work with a lot of the technologies that give us access to the metaverse. So we work a lot with AR, VR, increasingly AI as well, but also mobile phones and desktop and all these good things as well. My favourite definition of the metaverse is actually Kathy Hackle's, when she talks about this convergence of our digital and physical lives. So the idea is that our physical lives are going to get more digital with things like wearable technology. Our digital lives are going to get more physical with, spatial computing, things like virtual reality. And I really like this because it takes us away from this kind of Ready Player One dystopian view of the metaverse, where we're all just trying to go to the metaverse to escape how awful reality is. And instead it becomes more about enhancing all of our worlds. So that makes me feel really optimistic about what the metaverse is.
Excellent. Good to know your position on that. Liz, how about you?
Thanks, Kate. Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Thelman. I'm Head of Learning Strategy at Sponge. I probably have a much less informed definition of the metaverse than the ones you've just heard. So I've got a sort of personal story behind this. So when I was about 10 years old, my dad was very hyped about this thing called the internet. And I remember vividly the day we sat at the computer, he opened up Internet Explorer, probably version 1998. He opened it up and he said, "Here it is, here's the internet." And I thought, oh, is that it? When he talked about the internet as a 10-year-old child, I'd imagined it as something living and breathing and moving, almost like a world where I could be part of it and connect with others in that space as well. So I guess for me, the metaverse is that definition that I had as a 10-year-old, hopefully, that sort of spatial, more immersive internet that I dreamt of, and therefore obviously very optimistic about seeing that come to life.
Excellent. Well, I love that you've mentioned sort of moving about, and we've got our sort of embodied avatars on the screen here. And while we've done that, I thought it would be interesting to just talk to you all about that. Briefly, just to say who I am, I'm Kate Pasterfield. I was a co-founder of Sponge many eons back, and am now a learning and immersive consultant after having done a master's in virtual and extended realities a couple of years ago. And so I've got a real passion for this space. I'm excited and curious by the metaverse, and I've spent a long time kind of looking at what I think it is. And I've boiled my definition down to the immersive web, and then in brackets, and all that entails, so I can get over sort of tokenomics and all the infrastructural questions that I think it's kind of it involves. But while we're here and you've got your avatars on screen, I'd love to just talk a little bit about how we might present ourselves. We're talking about the workplace metaverse, and I was looking at my avatar and thinking, gosh, I'm not sure that's an appropriate outfit for work, but I'm really curious as to some of the choices that you guys have made with your avatars, and whether or not you think we have multiple identities for different sort of online locations, or whether we are able to have one identity that works for all things. Maybe I could start with you, Sophie. What do you think about that?
Yeah, sure. So this is an avatar that I created in Ready Player Me, because I was looking for something that would work in Zoom after Lumi folded or got sunlit. And I don't use this one, but I have really similar ones across all the different platforms. They all kind of look broadly the same. And I was thinking about this, like even my meta handle is just Sophie_Costin, and everyone else has fun things like Big Sausage 99 or whatever it is. And I just have one persona for everything. which I think is really boring. And I don't know if it leaves me like, I always feel really like boring in social situations, and then in professional situations, like an avatar like this just feels, I don't know, like a bit not how I'd want to present myself. So I think maybe I do need to get on the bandwagon of having a work avatar and a home avatar, and a work handle and a home handle, but I'm not quite there yet. I just use the same across everything at the moment.
Excellent. No, I can understand that. And Liz, I know you sort of recently crafted this avatar. What were your kind of thought processes in terms of professional life and personal life?
Yeah, I guess for me, reflecting on my choice of avatar, I'm impressed that of all of the options available to me in the limited universe that is the metaverse, I chose jeans and a roll neck. I think that's very impressive. I don't know what that says about my application. But I think for me, and this is like, first time putting an avatar together for myself, I very much felt drawn to making it as realistic as possible. Rather than doing like another version of myself, what felt natural was to try and almost replicate how I see myself in the metaverse environment. So that's where I was, I guess, initially drawn to, and something that would extend both work and personal life in that way.
Thank you. And Frank, tell me a bit about the choice that you've made here. You've got a holographic avatar.
Well, if you think about what we just, what you just said, that maybe you can have multiple avatars depending, where you're going, if it's a work or not. Think about this can be applied in a real life. So basically, I wear some clothes when I go to work. I wear some other clothes when I go to the mountain, right? So so far, I haven't found the right shop, digitally, where I can buy the clothes that I want. So until I don't find the right shop, I'm not going to use an avatar. So that's why, I stick here the digital version of myself, which is an hologram.
I love it. And I think it's for a whole other time, but metaverse fashion is a huge topic, and it's just been Metaverse Fashion Week. So maybe that shop exists, Frank. You just haven't.
Exactly.
Well, let's move on to some of our questions now. I want to talk a little bit about qualities of the metaverse that are appealing to the workplace. So for context, we've just talked a little bit about one quality, which is embodiment, and that gives us the ability to move around a space, a 3D space. I'm really curious to know each of the qualities that you think are appealing to a workplace context, and why. And perhaps, Frank, I could start with you. What qualities do you think are appealing in the workplace? Qualities of the metaverse?
Wow. There are many of them, Kate. In fact, all type of business, both from innovators or late adopters, are thinking or actively exploring application of the metaverse. Right. That's why we are all here with a really nice, kind of big number of attendees. But as I said, when we are looking for, when people are looking for metaverse, in reality they are looking for transformation, right? So using new technologies and experiences to transform the current business, because they realize that currently maybe the current business operations, procedures, or training are not effective anymore, hence why they need to be transformed. So a transformation in every organization imply changes. So it's all about people. So when you think about what are the benefits of using a metaverse, you need to focus on people. What are the changes that you are asking to your people to transform the current business? Therefore, metaverse technologies has got so many benefits. I can list a few of them, such as it can increase the content retention. So if you want to communicate a specific topic, I don't know, for change behavior or whatever, there is no better way than using metaverse technologies to actually do that imprinting in their brain. They are far more engaging, than other technologies, such as a boring PowerPoint, if you wish. And then they improve employee performance and satisfaction as well, because the whole experience, it's far more engaged and immersive than any other digital channels. This, as a result, has got then a reduction on post training errors, if you wish, if you're talking about the training type of metaverse. But at the end of the day, what you are doing, you are reducing the knowledge acquisition for that specific topic. Either it can be a training, or it can be, it can be a process oriented, and so on and so forth.
Okay, I'm just thinking about when you say change, can you just give us a quick example of what you mean?
Think about any if you need to go through a transformation, you need to transform procedures and processes. Every time that you need to transform the way that you work, you need to change behavior on people, right? So, and changing behavior on people is not an easy task to do it. So how you motivate, how you actually augment that topic to ask people to change the way that they've been doing their work, and then now they need to change it because there is a different way to do it. And it's one of the hardest tasks in a business, to change behavior, on people, essentially.
Well, thank you. I think I'm interested in this idea of engagement that you talked about, and we know that's kind of underpinned by the learning science. Liz, what qualities do you think about when you think of the metaverse, and what makes it appealing for workplaces?
Yeah, I think for me, working mostly in learning strategy, I'm often advocating for learners to have more autonomy over what they do, in everything from learning pathways to learning from their peers and social learning, to ultimately how they prioritize their professional development goals and learning goals at work. So for me, the metaverse feels like a unique opportunity to provide that genuine autonomy of experience that we've been looking for a long time. I think there's a real freedom inherent in much of the talk around the metaverse, which is super exciting, right? But the main challenge I think we'll face as workplaces is how we balance the logistics and maybe even the ethics of that freedom, and how we manage that, and almost the pendulum swinging completely the other direction as it is now.
Brilliant, thank you. And Sophie, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think for me, the most appealing thing, the most exciting thing is that it's a blank canvas. We can meet anywhere. And there's been such seismic shifts in the way that we work and collaborate over the last 3 years. And most of that has just been driven by the speed of need. And we've just all been sort of making it work for 3 years now. So the opportunity to actually step back and think, where do I want to be? What world do I want to inhabit? What impact is that going to have on me? What's desirable? Just seems like such a unique opportunity. There was a study published recently by Stanford University where they tracked, I think it's 272 students learning in the metaverse over 8 weeks, and they looked at different environments and where they were learning best, and they found that natural, large outdoor spaces were having the best impact on those students, and actually small, cramped corporate environments were having a negative impact on them. So there's real food for thought there, I think.
Gosh, these were virtual outdoor spaces, were they?
Yeah,
Interesting.
Exactly.
Interesting.
They were having classroom sessions in the metaverse, but some of them were outside in a forest, and some of them were on a tube train, and so they were just kind of mixing it up and then tracking the levels of engagement, the levels of interaction between the pupils during that session, what they gained from that session, how they felt about it, and overwhelmingly they felt much more positive. They interacted much more fluidly in these large outdoor virtual environments.
Fantastic. Well, I think we're hearing things about transformation and change, the space being more engaging, the metaverse being able to provide autonomy to users. And I love this idea of a blank canvas. As you know, I'm very passionate about design and how things kind of look and feel, and the atmosphere that can be created. And I think having spent many years as a 2D designer, now having to try and embrace 3D worlds and thinking spatially, it is a bit of a leap, and so I'm fascinated by how we can do that well and not necessarily replicate the same old boring worlds. You've reminded me of a really fun metaverse world that I was in recently in VR chat called Happy Hill Dog Park. That did this in VR. Have you been in, where you can throw a ball or a stick for your virtual dog? And there's a part of me that wants to like cry with sadness at the thought of that, but also I really enjoyed myself in there with these sort of virtual experiences. So outdoors in your headset is kind of a interesting space. All right, well, let's talk a bit more about sort of metaversities and intraverses. One of the big sort of tenets of the metaverse and the big vision for it is that it's decentralized, it's not controlled by any one entity. If we're in a workplace and we create, by definition, an intraverse, do you guys think that that's sort of fundamentally at odds with the idea of a decentralized metaverse? And does it matter? Let me start with you, Liz. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. But for me, I think the intraverse has to be compatible with the idea of the metaverse, because working with large organizations, as long as I have in the learning strategy sphere, I know that they're going to want their own secure spaces for employees to connect, to experience these things. And I'm not sure the philosophical vision for the metaverse will stand in the way of that. I think organizations are already doing it, and it's going to happen. There are going to be these intraverses secure to specific companies. We talked about the metaverse just now as like this blank canvas, and I absolutely agree. Like, that's super exciting. It comes with huge potential, but with that potential and that space and that blank canvas of freedom, it also comes with the potential for us to screw it up a little bit as well. So intranets are also a blank canvas, and we've all seen very ugly, soul-destroying intranets in our time. So how do we keep, I guess, the challenge, the beauty and the joy and the freedom of the principles of the metaverse, and take that into an intraverse environment that is secure, it is accessible for all employees, and it is safe for all employees, but it also embodies the freedom and the beauty that we've talked about. I think that's the main challenge, kind of embracing that freedom without layering on too many restrictions in that way.
Good balance of thought there. Sophie, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I really agree with Liz. I think I don't think that an intraverse is a challenge to a metaverse, but I think it needs to be coherent with the metaverse for it to be valuable. So, in the physical world, there are places that we can't access. I can't just go and walk into HSBC's head office sort of as I please. It's a locked off private environment, but those intraverses just need to be coherent with the metaverse. So if that door became unlocked, you could walk out and freely move around these sort of co-opable spaces, and you got a parity of experience. I think that's the thing. And I think the other thing that's really important is having some kind of interoperability between the different intraverses as well, because wouldn't it be a shame if you couldn't bring your learning record with you? We're all having many more jobs in our lifetime now, and it would be such a missed opportunity if you weren't able to sort of credentialize, grow your learning pathways, and that just got stuck in one intraverse, and then you'd change job and you'd have to sort of start again. So I think that's one to watch as well.
Yeah, really good point. That's been the dream, hasn't it, for sort of L&D for the last 20 years, I would say, is having all of our sort of portable qualifications, and maybe with blockchain technologies that becomes easier, who can say? I love your thinking on that. Frank, what are your thoughts on this sort of intraverse idea? Is it compatible with the idea of a decentralized metaverse?
It is. I mean, if we needed to use some analogy, you can think about an intraverse like an intranet. Every corporate has got an intranet, but doesn't mean that the internet is not open, essentially, right? So you're going to have your intranet metaverse, you're going to have your external metaverse. And then the external metaverses, I agree with Sophie, needs to have some sort of, freedom to move between metaverse. But when it comes to intranet, intraverse, that is a totally different game. So you can access only if you got a VPN, essentially, right? Like today on our intranet. So it's a very simplicity. Maybe it's a simple way to look at stuff, but at the end of the day, you need to think about, boundaries, and you need to put those boundaries for security reasons, as we cover today.
You've touched on something really important there, and I think, Liz, you picked up on this too, about sort of security and safety. And one thing I'm really interested in is the sort of limitations and risks that we ought to be thinking about now, potentially as many of us are at the beginning of this sort of embracing of the more immersive web and our internal intranets. And we already have an internet filled with kind of security risks, personal safety breaches, trolling, social abuse. Are these things going to be magnified in a workplace metaverse, and how can we guard against them? Sophie, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting and important topic as well. I mean, we found from our own forays into the metaverse, so we as a company at MakeReal, we meet quite regularly in various sorts of metaverse environments, and we found that there's various features that already exist, like a social bubble, so you can set up a guardian zone for yourself that people can't enter. Because we found that people in the company who had sort of certain sensitivities, they were really uncomfortable that as you sort of pile into alt space, you can literally spawn on top of someone. And
Yes.
when it's a 3D physical environment, that feels really real. You really feel like you're sort of in someone's personal space, and that can actually have quite a negative impact on you, that you then, when you take off the headset, you still have that feeling. So I think there's definitely a lot of social risks there, and I think it's easy to dismiss because it's digital and it's not real. But actually, when you get into a 3D space, we're very good at tricking our brains to thinking that this is the real world, and so all those negative impacts that we have in the real world very much translate into this metaverse environment.
How many of you, out of interest on this call, have had a sort of strange, unpleasant experience of those sort of social risks in a metaverse type world?
Yeah,
I certainly have.
Yeah.
I certainly have. One of the times I was in VR chat, and I hadn't been really watching what I was doing, and someone was kind of following me, was like really up in my face, and I just found that very uncomfortable, even though I wasn't me, I was my embodied avatar and they were their avatar, but I didn't know them, and it was deeply uncomfortable. So I think you're right to raise that in a virtual reality metaverse context, a guardian zone feels really sensible to protect against those sort of social risks. Would anyone else like to add anything about risks that we should be guarding against in the metaverse?
Yeah, Kate. I mean, right now we're kind of focusing more into the metaverse as an immersive experience.
Yep.
But let's not forget that the metaverse, it's also the interaction with the real world. So
Yep.
it's kind of embrace both VR and AR technology.
Yes.
So when you go into AR technology, you got all sort of other things that you need to take care. Maybe you don't have that kind of avatar experience, but at the same time, you don't want that. People scan who you are with your smart glasses, while you're working. So the fundamental thing is that every new technology revolution comes with challenges, no doubt. Any single technology has got pros and cons. The most important thing is that we need to realize that we cannot stop technology's revolutions. No one can stop it. It's going to happen. So what we have to do as government, as a professionalism and government, we need to make sure that that technology is regulated, it's kind of compliant with the current and potentially the new law, right? So I think simply, this is a different example. It's not a metaverse, it's more about ChatGPT, right? So think of what's happened in Italy last week, where the Italian government said, look, there are some issues here in terms of privacy. Can you answer what you're doing? The government didn't stop ChatGPT. They simply inquiry to get back to them how they treat the privacy, the data. ChatGPT, I don't know, from my personal point of view, they didn't have everything correct in place. So instead of replying to the government, they decided to stop the service in Italy until maybe they don't get complied with GDPR, essentially, right? So technology is going to happen, but we need we cannot stop it. We need simply to make sure that follow the
I'm getting a little bit of cutting out on you, Frank. Oh no. Thank you, Frank. I'm going to move on to ask Liz the same question. Well, maybe we get our connection back. Anything you wanted to add, Liz, on risks that we should be aware of?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and definitely security risks, and I think that's why the intraverse piece is really important to help guard against that. But maybe more of a general risk or a limitation is just like, how do we make sure metaverse environments in the workplace are inclusive of everyone? I freely admit that I've worked in learning tech for over a decade, and I still find the idea of the metaverse overwhelming at times. There is so much information to take on. There is so much to understand about it. What about those people with less digital skills? What about those people with accessibility needs? How do we make sure as workplaces that we are being inclusive, and we're designing from the very start with that in mind? I think we're having conversations now that are very much sort of assuming that everyone knows the same thing and everyone's on board with it, but how do we capture the, maybe the majority of people who are less familiar with it and less comfortable?
I think that's right, and it's always the way with new technologies too, that we sort of seem to be a bit behind the curve. We figure out these things as we go while we're all getting used to it, and maybe, and I love that that's kind of why we're having this conversation now, to try and be sensible and mindful and thoughtful about how we do include everyone, how we do keep ourselves safe, how what steps we can take. So and I do like the idea of actually this intraverse. It's making me reflect on the fact that in fact it could be a safer option just by definition, because it would be a workplace kind of owned. So that does seem like a really smart thing to do in a workplace. On that note, who's already embracing metaverses for work? Sophie, could you give us some examples of workplace sort of metaverses that you've experienced or created?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's quite hard to embrace the metaverse at this juncture because it doesn't fully exist yet. And I think actually now is the right time for sort of low risk experimentation with the metaverse, and we've been doing that with a number of clients. Some of our key clients like Lloyds Banking Group and also NHSBT. We've been creating metaverse worlds for them where we all just meet and just to increase our metaverse literacy. So, even moving around a metaverse environment is a skill to acquire if you've never done it before. And, just sort of moving through the main, ability to interact is it's just a really clarifying experience where you suddenly realize, oh, this is how it's going to work for me. And actually, this is where the barriers lie. So we've been doing those kind of sessions with a number of clients. And also we have other clients who are sort of bracing the interactivity of the metaverse more as well. I think I'm a bit nervous about all these metaverse platforms where you're really just recreating a classroom session in a digital world, and actually the potential for the metaverse is so much more than that. So for example, we've worked with Network Rail to create a mile's worth of live track, like recreate a piece of track that actually exists in the real world, and then learners can network in using headsets from wherever they are, and a teacher networks in as well. And they go through track safety in this sort of realistic environment, and it can be demonstrated, it can be practiced, and it can be coached all in this live environment, which I think is really kind of tapping into the metaverse's potential. So I think it's hard to embrace the metaverse at the moment, but companies who are starting to experiment in this way, I think they're going to be best placed to embrace it when that is more of a possibility.
I think I want to just draw a quick distinction at this point between the metaverse and virtual reality. Frank, you've talked a little bit about augmented reality, and I think at some point we've also mentioned web access. To me, let me know if you guys agree with this. To me, the metaverse is kind of like the internet, and the technologies are the ways that you access it. So your headset is a way of, virtual reality is one way. Augmented reality is another way of augmenting things from a sort of digital realm into our worlds, and desktop is another, and mobile is another, and all of these ways are valid. Do you guys agree, disagree?
No, absolutely. And the worlds that we've been creating in these metaverse literacy sessions that we've been doing, we try and get most people in on a headset because it is the most immersive way of experiencing it. But we also make sure that people are dialing in on desktop and dialing in on mobile as well, so that we can see what it's like when people are accessing from different technologies and all trying to come together and interact at once. And what's that like? Does that give a parity of experience? What are the challenges there as well? Yeah, I think this is absolutely not reliant on any one technology.
Super. I know, Frank, you're also working with clients in this metaverse space. Maybe you could give us an example of one where you're using this sort of mixed modality to access immersive worlds.
Indeed, mixed modality, as I said, multi-channel, it's key, to experience this new way of content consumption of these any sort of content. So, I mean, on exactly, what Sophie said. I mean, it's more about experimenting with this technology to prove to clients that it's a completely different type of interaction, but as well as, and more importantly, to prove that provide hard benefits that maybe no other technology can provide you with. So, we are here not to evangelize simply new technology, but we are here to actually shout to anyone that this technology has got hard and soft benefits for any single corporate. And the example that I can highlight here, it's all the work that we've been doing for Coca-Cola. For example, we managed the whole Coca-Cola plants for bottles around X number of countries around the world. And one of the things there is how to not only train the people in a safe environment, so bringing them into a virtual world, as Sophie said. It can be even 3 degrees of freedom, 6 degrees of freedom, but I don't want to go into the technicality of them. But also, after the training, how then can experience, can tap the content, can tap into the content during they do the job. So essentially, right? So you got the 2 parts where we did VR training, and then we did AR kind of content accessibility through all the plant while they were doing the job. So it's basically training on the work of flow, as we would say. And the benefits were amazing, not only you, from a training point of view, you reduce 100% all the accident and risks that you may have if instead you're using real machinery, if you wish. But also we got the employees that were far more, I know we keep talking about the word engaging, but they were far more, let's say, happy, to actually absorb those content using these new technologies. And these led to a much more 75% increase in efficiency at their work, and they reduced the accident into the job by 3%, which maybe doesn't sound a lot, but that 3% of accident reduction, not only you didn't have any people injured, which ethical, provide a massive benefits to your workforce, but from a business point of view, they managed to save 2 million in insurance. So it's a win-win from every angle that you look at this stuff, So that's a quick example.
Love that you're measuring that, and sounds like a fascinating case study with Coca-Cola. Liz, tell us a bit about any examples you know of where there's an organization who's embracing the metaverse for work.
Yeah, it's super interesting to look at examples of like learning requirements that we would normally maybe meet with digital learning or even face-to-face learning, and how companies are embracing this from the metaverse perspective. So onboarding and effective onboarding is something that I'm really passionate about, and certainly we know in a hybrid world it's even more challenging to get it right. Read a couple of bits recently around how Accenture are creating a metaverse for their onboarding environment, which seems really interesting. So when you're a new employee in Accenture, you will enter a virtual campus, you will create your avatar naturally, and you'll explore all of these different types of training stations, as well as kind of Easter eggs along the way. Apparently there's even like a virtual zip line that makes you feel like you're flying in the environment, like really cool stuff that I would imagine enhances our onboarding experience, particularly in that hybrid setting. So yeah, I'm really interested in that and what companies are doing to apply the metaverse to things that we would usually just embrace digitally.
Thank you for that. I think one of sort of affordances of this technology, that of kind of really making it feel like we're present together, this kind of embodied social aspect plays in really well to the onboarding side of things. And that feels like a really important additional dimension to the metaverse that we can get over and above some of the other technologies that we perhaps have been used to using. And I love the other thing that's come up quite loud and clear about it being a space where we can practice and fail safely and be placed into dangerous or high speed or complex environments at a reasonable cost. And you know, that's a whole other discussion, is how much these sorts of experiences cost. But once you've built your sort of metaverse or immersive asset, that can be reused and reused so long as your process stands. So I really like the examples that you shared. We're getting towards the end of our questions before we turn over to our audience questions. And one of the things that, Frank, you talked about were some benefits. You talked about 3% in accident reductions, which was significant and very impressive in terms of sort of safety, and reduction of 2 million in insurance and 75% increase in efficiency at work. We may not all have the sort of hard metrics at our fingertips, but Sophie, what do you think? Let's think about L&D specifically. How might kind of organizations benefit from embracing metaverse type experiences, let's say?
I find this a really hard question to answer, because in the long term, it's going to be like saying, how would businesses benefit from using the internet? Like,
right.
That's kind of the trajectory we're on. So I'd almost like to flip the question and say, well, what are the risks of not getting involved now? You know, what will that do to your company in sort of 10 years' time? And I think the main ones will be things like, you know, a real compromise in terms of collaboration. You know, that thing you were talking about, social presence, being able to collaborate, being able to innovate. I think companies who aren't getting involved now will be running to catch up in that area. There'll be all kinds of efficiencies that can be gained from being able to seamlessly transition between your digital and physical world that companies will be missing out on. And I think the other big one is about attracting and retaining talent. We were just talking about onboarding there. It's such a big use case. It's such a clear use case. And if companies aren't getting involved now, it's already becoming increasingly challenging to get the right talent on board and to keep that talent. And I think that's only going to get harder if you don't start embracing the metaverse now.
Brilliant. So we run the risk of having less advanced collaboration, becoming less efficient, and not being able to attract and retain talent if we don't go for it. That's the way some organizations can benefit. Thank you. Liz, what about your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think for me, I'd probably build on that theme of collaboration from Sophie there. So we know that learning from your peers is one of the most effective ways that you can learn in an organisation. And I think the metaverse could really help with our looming upskilling challenge in that way. I think even in a hybrid world as we've got right now, our social networks at work can be surprisingly small to reach out to people to learn and grow from. So I think there's an opportunity for the metaverse to remove some of these barriers, help sort of colleagues and organizations permeate knowledge, and maybe just build that culture and understanding a little bit more too. So really helping colleagues to take ownership of their peer-to-peer exchanges, I think, in that way. And also we spoke sort of briefly about the opportunity to have practice opportunities in metaverse environments if we are in that way, for example, as well. So naturally we know businesses are already doing that, and that's certainly compelling too. But yeah, I think social and practice are the main sort of things that I'm excited about for L&D.
Excellent, thank you. Frank, did you want to add any other benefits you think for organizations we can see and look forward to?
Well, I think we pretty much cover everything. Maybe one thing that we didn't touch into it's about unleashing new revenue streams as well. So it is about saving cost. It is about optimizing the production line. It is about reducing.
Oh no, we're losing Frank.
Accident or reducing the carbon opportunity to actually get new revenue streams and maybe have a competitive advantages. You've
reminded me, Frank, of something that Tommaso Di Bartolo, who is one of the authors of Navigating the Metaverse, this book, I think, who mentioned Kathy Hackle before. Sorry, you can't see it, but it's called Navigating the Metaverse. He says this: GMP, so gross metaverse product, will surpass GDP. The metaverse will generate more products and services and revenue. This will be based on a workforce that is bigger than the real world. Finally, we will develop the future of the workforce and the future of learning in the metaverse. This will lead to the new mindset, the new consumer, the new worker, the new human being who works and lives in the metaverse. That is my vision. Oh. So that's what his impression is. But I like that you brought up unleashing new revenue streams, because I think it does help us to just think slightly differently about this. Although we are in a kind of L&D context, so we always have to be thinking about that too. Yes, Vicky, I can post a link to that book in a moment. What I'd love to do now is have Andrew help me pick out some questions from our audience, so that we can direct them towards our fantastic panel. I just want to say thank you to the panel for everything that you've shared so far. And yeah,
so many questions.
So many. How about let's go for
let's try and bring some together. So there was a number of questions about accessibility, people talking about neurodivergence, people talking about physical access, people talking about upload speeds and so on. So there's a question around accessibility. What are the risks, and how do we mitigate some of the risks around accessibility within the metaverse?
Yeah, it's such an important topic. If I can dive in, if that's all right, just very quickly first. I am no expert on neurodivergency, but it is a really important topic, and I've started to do a bit of reading on it and a bit of research on it, and it feels like it can be quite an inclusive space if we set out with that intention. And it's, that is one of the real risks of the metaverse. If we don't set out with that intention to make it a diverse space, then it won't be. But I think that it can be. One thing that I saw at Immersive Tech Week last year in Rotterdam, there was a demo of a virtual reality experience. We have this big button on your wrist, a big virtual button on your wrist for people with autism. So at any point you can hit that button and the world just sort of fades to black. So if you're too stimulated by it, then you have that instant control just to remove yourself from that world and come back when you're ready. We've also done work with the Blind Veterans Association. So you'd sort of think that maybe these kind of visual worlds might preclude people who have limited sight, but actually they got loads from it in really unexpected ways, even down to people who really didn't have very much sight at all. The spatial audio was really exciting for them and very stimulating for them. And then a lot of people, aren't fully blind, where they have some sightedness, and there's still the possibility of accessing those worlds. So there's obviously physical barriers, because a lot of this technology is physical technology. But I think there is the potential there to make it quite accessible, as long as we intend it to be, as long as we have that as a focus. That's what I'd say.
Thank you for that. So, something maybe just to add is we did a study many years back. It was a pilot where we gave people 3 different use cases: a PDF to learn some information, a game, and a virtual reality experience. And what we found was that people who did the virtual reality experience found it equal to or better than the game. But what was most striking is that one of the participants who had dyslexia said, that is the way that I would learn. I find it really difficult learning in some of the more traditional formats. And this, she said, I think I'd remember this forever. She's very evangelistic about it. But it really, I can't say that that's a statistically significant study, of course not. But anecdotally, I am curious about whether there are advantages for people with, in instances of dyslexia, certainly. So yeah, anybody else want to add anything on the topic of accessibility or access?
I can, but maybe we can move it to other questions, so we cover all the other
Okay,
topics.
more things. All right, great.
Well,
well, let's do that, and we can come back to it later if we need to. You're right. You're to be mindful of time, Frank. Thank you.
There was
Andrew,
another question in relation to accessibility, or another part of it was access to the equipment, access to the bandwidth in order to be able to make it work.
Right.
And it's interesting, we've seen this happen in relation to the session today, because Frank's internet has been in and out a little bit, and volume and so on, and images. So how do we mitigate that as well?
Well, then talking about accessibility, we collaborate with a company which is called VR Therapists. They provide therapists in VR to people with disabilities, or people that had maybe an injury after at work, and then they had to recover. So there are ways to get around of it. So accessibility, it's a hot issue that needs to be addressed in these technologies, but there are ways to get around of it. That is one element. The second element is what Katie said, open up to all other opportunities instead that disabled people are not able to do with the current technology, right? So even that is another benefits that the metaverse could add to those people.
I think the other important thing on that is that the metaverse doesn't really exist yet. We're starting to get the threads of what the metaverse will be, but the processing power doesn't exist yet to support, the kind of level of spatial computing that we're talking about in these kind of interoperable worlds. So, I guess all those problems will still carry through, but it's maybe not comparable to a Zoom call. And hopefully the infrastructure will fix that.
I think maybe we've got time for one more question, Andrew, before we go to
So again, I'll summarise a couple. Marcus picked this up, and I saw Modi one as well. Using the metaverse for learning and assessing practical skills, and also the balancing between instructor-led training and physical training. How's the metaverse going to fit into that space?
The question is, how's the metaverse going to help us learn practical skills?
Yeah,
Okay.
And
that's
also assessment and so on as well.
Well, let's just
I
think that's probably
it's another one of those where do you start questions.
Feels to me like that was the earliest.
Yeah,
that was the earliest use case, I think. Who would like to pick up that one? Liz, do you want to have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just think it is one of the more natural use cases, right? And Sophie and Frank, I know you're doing incredible stuff in this area already. At Sponge, we did experiments as far back as sort of 5 years ago around how to support postal workers with dog safety in a virtual environment, so kind of assessing the risk in that way. Really able to apply those practical skills in a much more immersive environment. And I think assessment would naturally fall from that and be much more effective than some of our assessment strategies that we're currently using in a digital or offline space.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I think we might have to kind of start to wrap up our session. I think it's been really fantastic to hear from everyone. I just wanted to let people know where they might be able to hear from us in the future. There are a few interesting, all of us are going to be at Learning Technology, so worth me just mentioning that. Liz and I will be doing another talk on our beautiful metaverse, we're calling it, diving in a little bit more deeply on how it will sort of look, feel, and how we can create spaces at the workplace. Sophie is going to be doing a talk as well on the same day in the afternoon, getting started with AI in, I can't actually read what I've put there, for learning. And Frank, I know you've got a whole bunch of talks going on over the 2 days, so please, feel free to come and see us there. What I'd like to do is just ask the brilliant panel one final question to finish up with, and that is this. And we'll start with you, Frank. How urgently should L&D teams be embracing the metaverse? And what's one thing they can do as a next step?
So I can leave you with one line. So this technology, you want to call it metaverse or extended reality, VR, AR, let's call it the blended learning 3.0, as we call it, is not the future. Let's be honest, it is happening now. The metaverse as a form will potentially, happen in terms of technology, but these technologies are not the future. They are happening now. So my advice is run a pilot and start walking before everyone will start running and leave you behind them. So that is my advice that, to
Get going.
leave today.
Thank you so much, Frank. And Sophie, how about you?
Yeah, really similar. It's now is the perfect time to get started with low risk experimentation so that you don't get left behind. So my advised next step would be to go and open a spatial account or a Horizon Workplace account. Other metaverse platforms are available, but these ones are free and they're multi-platform as well. So you could just open an account on your desktop.
Yeah.
Have a meeting in one of these spaces so that you can see firsthand where are the benefits, where are the challenges, and yeah, just get involved.
Super, thank you. And Liz, how urgent is this, and what's one thing L&D can do as a next step?
Well, I completely agree with Frank and Sophie, right? The metaverse is coming, it's here, and we need to start preparing for it. My tip is that specifically from an L&D perspective, we know that our industry can also be guilty of new shiny thing syndrome. So when you're starting your experiments with the metaverse, as Sophie said, kind of opening those accounts, starting to play, really know your why behind those experiments. Do you want to embrace social more? Is it about knowledge sharing? Is it about practice opportunities? Is it about engagement? Being really specific with that will help you make sure that you are embracing the metaverse to answer some specific questions on your L&D strategy and make it really meaningful moving forward.
That's fantastic. We are bang on 1 o'clock. We are going to have to finish, I think, now. Do we need to do any further summing up, Andrew, or can I just thank the brilliant people here for being on?
No.
being on
I just want to say, I just want to say thank you. That was an amazing conversation. Thank you, everybody, for your questions and answers, but massive thank you to our panel. Thank you to Liz, thank you to Frank, thank you to Sophie, and also to you, Kate, for managing and able to spin that around into a narrative that actually makes sense, because it's so vast a topic. I think you've done an absolutely brilliant job there, and the feedback in the chat is absolutely saying that. Like Kate said, we're all going to be at Learning Technologies, so come and talk to us about this stuff if you're going to be there. If you can't be at Learning Technologies, in the chat there on the left hand side, you can see you've got all the contact details for Kate and Sophie and Frank and Liz and so on. I've also pasted some of the other links into the chat as well. Again, when you come and look at the repeat of this or the recording and you want to have a look back, you can find all the other links and so on that are in there as well. Is the learning tech in the metaverse next year? That's a good question, Kevin, and yeah, one potentially to be asked about, perhaps. That's an interesting.
We should have done that, shouldn't we?
Yeah, learning tech in the metaverse, absolutely. Learning Technologies Conference. Just leaves me to say thank you to everybody. Thank you to everybody for, like I say, your participation. We will be back, but after the summer. We're taking a few weeks break, quite simply because we have to book and sort out stuff for Learning Technologies. So we will be back again in a few months' time. But for now, thank you to everybody. Thank you to my panel. I'm going to stop the recording and I'm going to close the doors. So you're going to disappear. Panel, you want to stay with me for a minute or two? That'd be great. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you soon.